government may have been crackling with revolutionary zeal, but militarily they were weak. Saddam saw his opportunity to strangle the Ayatollah's threatening vision in its crib. As a result, on September 22, 1980, squadrons of Iraqi fighters swarmed into Iranian airspace and attacked a collection of bases near Tehran. The Iran-Iraq War had begun.
Hacer que aparezca, aunque sea el vuelto a aparecer. Vamos allá. Objetivo a la vista. Va conduciendo un Subaru.
Controla el habla. El coche se ha visto por última vez en Underwood Gardens.
Se choca con todo lo que encuentra.
Saddam had envisioned his air attack would have the same effect as the Israeli strikes did in the Six-Day War of 1967. Upon securing aerial superiority, he believed Iraqi victory would be swift and inevitable. Unfortunately for him, this did not materialize. The aerial attack was unsuccessful, only doing partial damage to the air bases and destroying an insignificant number of aircraft. Nevertheless, Saddam launched a ground invasion the very next day, attacking in 3 separate locations in the north, center, and south. Much of the Iraqi manpower was dedicated to the southern attack, which targeted Iran's Arab-dominated Khuzestan province, in the process fully securing the Shatt al-Arab. Almost immediately, the Khuzestani cities of Khorramshahr and Abadan were besieged. Both sieges would be protracted and delayed the Iraqi offensive, thus giving Iran sufficient time to stabilize and calculate its strategy. Although Khorramshahr would be captured by the end of October, the Iraqi offensive was seriously delayed by outnumbered Iranian units who fought tooth and nail to defend the city. Abadan, the site of the famous refinery, took even longer, with the siege being dragged out until September 1981 and ending in an Iranian victory. Right from the get-go, Saddam was surprised by the Iranian response. Considering the political turbulence the country had experienced in the previous few years, he had almost assumed Iran would wither from the pressure of an external attack and internal upheaval from ordinary Iranians. Instead, what he found was a disjointed nation that was galvanized by a foreign aggressor. Domestically, Ayatollah Khomeini was facing serious threats from all directions. The MEK were launching attacks on high-ranking members of the regime. Even amongst the ulama, there was dissension with Khomeini's strict vision. Segments of Iranian society itself was becoming alienated with the Islamic Republic as it slowly realized it had replaced one dictator in the Shah with another in Khomeini. But rather than capitulating, Ayatollah Khomeini saw an opportunity to secure his Islamic revolution. The military investments made by the Shah in the previous few decades meant that the country still retained fairly sophisticated weaponry. The Iranian response was decisive. In fact, just 2 hours after the initial Iraqi airstrike, Iranian fighter jets responded with their own attack. 2 months later, in November, Operation Morvarid prevented Iraqi dominance over the Persian Gulf and destroyed much of the Iraqi navy. This meant Iraq could not entirely blockade the port of Abadan, allowing Iran to resupply it by sea and thereby directly contributing to the siege's eventual failure. From early 1981 onwards, Iraqi offensives essentially stalled. In January of that year, it was Iran's turn to go on the offensive, launching Operation Nasr. The brainchild of President Bani Sadr, it was intended to drive the Iraqis out of Khuzestan. But internal turmoil within the new Iranian government meant that the operation would end up becoming a disastrous failure. Upon ascending to power, Khomeini had purged the military of officers whose loyalties he doubted. Countless senior officers were imprisoned, executed, or fled abroad. At the same time, he had established the Sepai Pastaran, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, to ensure the protection of the Islamic Republic. This resulted in a rivalry between the army and the IRGC. To further confound matters, this rivalry took shape politically as the moderate President Bani Sadr supported the army, whilst more hardliner members of the government supported the Revolutionary Guards. So when Operation Nasr failed, it set off a chain of events within Iran. Bani Sadr's opponents were emboldened, soon after impeaching him in June 1981. Knowing firsthand what happened to those who fell afoul of the regime, Bani Sadr decided to flee the country. From this point on, Iran's government was unified under Islamist hardliners who would intensify their grip on power over the next few years by eliminating all rivals. From 1980 to 1983, the regime launched the Cultural Revolution, seeking to root out nonconformist thought amongst institutions of higher education. Universities were shut down for this period, students and teachers were purged. Dissident groups like the MEK would fight back by unleashing a wave of high-profile attacks on prominent figures of the regime. An attack on the Prime Minister's office in August 1981 left both the new President Raja'i and Prime Minister Bahunar dead. Even the current Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, was the target of an assassination attempt a few months earlier in June 1981. The MEK would go on to collaborate with Saddam from 1983 onwards. This revolutionary crisis mode would come to pass by 1983, and it was to benefit Iran's war effort against Iraq. The rivalry between the army and the IRGC would also dissipate, thereby making coordinated attacks between the two branches of the military smoother.
They want people broke, weak, easy to manipulate and control. You can use the news to do that to adults, but a 13-year-old kid's going to put on his headphones and listen to music. It's such a beautiful thing to be independent because I'm not beholden to anybody. There's no record label, there's no manager, there's no sponsorship that I'm going to lose.
Do you care what people think about you?
No.
You're not just an artist, you're also an entrepreneur, so you get kicked in the face every day.
Already by May 1982, Saddam's forces had been driven out of Iranian land. Saddam did not have a military background. Regardless, he decided to play soldier and micromanage the war effort. Virtually all decisions had to be funneled through Saddam, resulting in a paralyzing bottleneck. Iraqi soldiers died by the tens of thousands because of their strategically inept commander-in-chief. Due to the culture of fear he had created, nobody dared question his decision-making. To counter the bad news from the front, Saddam sought to insulate the Iraqi civilian population from the uglier realities of war. Using the oil wealth he had accumulated, the dictator spent billions of dollars importing commodities to avoid shortages. Creating a false sense of normalcy and prosperity, it was all part of a larger pattern by Saddam to build an inescapable cult of personality. Iraqi citizens lived in a world where Saddam's image was as constant as the sun in the sky. At this point, Saddam's strategy changed from holding territory within Iran to not losing any within Iraq. Immediately, he tried to sue for peace. But Khomeini was uninterested, seeing the benefits the war had brought for his regime. The Iranians did, however, have a major problem on their hands. Ever since the hostage crisis of 1979, they had been facing severe international sanctions from the US and its allies. This meant replacing weapon parts was extremely difficult, an issue they sought to fix by cannibalizing parts from other machinery and turning to the black market. To highlight the complexity of geopolitics, Israel became one of the biggest suppliers of arms to Iran during the war. The Israelis first got permission from the Americans for these arms sales, which amounted to tens of billions of dollars. When Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin launched an attack on Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in 1981, it was done with Iranian intelligence. So even though publicly the Ayatollahs maintained an antagonistic stance towards Israel, and despite America publicly supporting the sanctions on Iran, through backdoor means they did the opposite. The US also secretly sold arms to Iran. In 1986, the Iran-Contra affair came to light and shocked the world. Under the Reagan administration, America had been selling weapons to Iran and using the funds to finance the Nicaraguan Contras, right-wing rebels fighting against the Marxist Sandinista government. This was all the more embarrassing because of Operation Staunch in 1983, where the US tried to diplomatically pressure other countries not to sell Iran arms. Besides these clandestine transactions, Iran mainly relied on China, Libya, and Syria for support in arms and logistical equipment. Iraq, on the other hand, received much more international support. Around the time that the war moved from Iranian to Iraqi soil, the oil-rich Gulf countries like Kuwait and Saudi Arabia started providing Saddam with massive loans, fearing Tehran's warlike and revolutionary regime would harm their own interests. Syria was one of the only Arab countries to stand behind Iran, shutting down the Kirkuk-Banias pipeline from 1982 onwards, resulting in a catastrophic loss of capital for Saddam, losing billions of dollars every month. But support from the Gulf countries prevented Iraq from bankruptcy, with some estimating Saudi loans alone to be $1 billion per month. In addition, Saddam also received a lot of support from the USSR and Western countries such as France and West Germany. In 1982, America normalized relations with Iraq and went on to provide the Iraqi dictator with military intelligence as well as selling arms to him. It was crucial for US interests in the Middle East for Iraq to not lose the war, because it would destabilize neighboring countries which had pro-American governments. Not to mention the massive impact an Iranian victory would have on the oil industry.